Hey, good morning, TechX development team and Connor. A question was asked to your team about course learning outcomes and kind of how they're situated or what makes them effective course learning outcomes. So let me give you a bit of a look at this curriculum map. I'll kind of answer that question with a bit of a story. Um, this map is in our shared files. I don't know if you've seen anything like this before, so I'll give you a bit of an overview of what we're looking at. Down the left-hand side, columns A and B give us the program learning outcomes or objectives that we've drafted at this point. So very draft. We're kind of taking an iterative prototyping approach to this. This is our minimum viable product we're looking at here, and we are purposefully putting it out so we can rework it, so we can adapt it, iterate upon it, particularly as we consult together, as we consult with others along the way. And we would encourage you to take the same approach to your course design um, as this conversation evolves. So again, down the left-hand side, initial draft program learning outcomes, big bold words, call in row 2, row 5, row 8, and so on. Along the right here, this is not yours yet, actually, this is just an example, but along the right, the columns C to H are courses. And what we would look for in a well-developed program and a full, robust, longer duration program is development of learning toward the satisfaction of these program learning outcomes. So, such as in this instance, program learning outcome 1 is first introduced in course 101, it's later reinforced in course 201, and it's finally mastered in course 210. And you'll see in this workbook, there's some working definitions of what those things mean down here for clarity. Um, Further to that kind of sequencing or progression, there's an embedded alignment with course learning outcomes. So in this instance, CTL 101, course learning outcome 1 aligns with program learning outcome 1. Course learning outcome 3 also aligns with program learning outcome. So we're creating some internal consistency within the program itself by looking at how the pieces fit together to the overall overarching program learning outcomes. Um, and then again, there's a progression, right? Later in course 201, we're building on that with course learning outcome 5. 210, we're building on it finally, and it's kind of culminating in course learning outcome 3 from course 210. Additionally, those course learning outcomes are then related to some specific assessments. So in the case of CTL 101, we're assessing these two course learning outcomes with a quiz. And that might be a simple assessment we would see when we're first introducing a course learning outcome or program learning outcome. But you'll see there's some progression established, at least in this example for illustration purposes. The next time we circle back to similar content or related content, we're developing the assessment as well with an assignment. And then in this instance, when we in our culminating work in this 210 course, we're further developing that learning. We're further increasing our expectations upon students with a presentation. So that's a bit of a look at what this map is starting to illustrate, and it's a conversation starter. It's not hard fast, it's not incredibly detailed, it's high level, but to illustrate the connection points across the curriculum. So I say that to show you this. Here's an example of where some draft course learning outcomes may fit in our draft program learning outcomes. And this is going to do a couple things for us. In our instance, early on in this prototype, it's going to validate these program learning outcomes. Are they accurate? Are they sufficient? Are there enough of them? You'll see in this case, I think it's feasible. We could map 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 course learning outcomes to a single program learning outcome. This likely suggests to me that our program learning outcome is not specific enough, right? If the content we're proposing may all fit in the same bucket, maybe that bucket is too broad, and maybe the program learning outcome on line 11 here needs to be differentiated into a few distinct program learning outcomes to more fully illustrate the overarching goals of the program. But I also say that just to show where there's some relationship. Here it looks like we have a strong relationship. It looks like this may validate both our proposed course learning outcome as well as our proposed program learning outcome. Similarly, in rows 3 and 2, right? This course learning outcome may validate the proposed program learning outcome. So I hope that's a bit of a sense of, how we can go about looking together and working together as we iterate, as we prototype and draft some course learning outcomes. This tool, this map, should give us a sense of how it may relate to what others are doing, and where we may want to have further conversations. If you have very similar course learning outcomes, that's not a bad thing, but it's probably worth talking about. What does that mean and what does that look like? And are we purposefully complementary, right? In that there's similar activities to reinforce related concepts, or is there redundancy that we could remove? Or are we so close that we should talk about where our similarities in language or approach may be found, or where again distinctions and differentiation is valid and necessary and purposeful, right? But all of that would inform the student experience as well. For example, if we all talk about design, but we talk about design in 5 different ways, we may have some confused students. But if we talk about design as an overarching principle and some various methodologies or approaches unique to different disciplines, now our students start to develop a more complex picture. One goal, for example, as we look at this, again with the example of design, is that we may very well at the end of the day want to see our students able to have a conversation with an employer to talk about what they learned about design, right? We may want them to articulate their learning with a few examples from the program or your course, or a single example, and explain their learning of the design process and what they're curious to do with it, right? How cool would that be? And what a great way to know that our program learning outcomes have been validated by the student experience and are useful and relevant for employers. Cheers.